Hello and welcome to Conversations with Barbara. I'm Barbara Kanellopoulos, and with me today is David Vieira, your State Representative for the 3rd Barnstable District. Welcome to the program, David.
Thanks, Barbara. It's great to be back in person.
Yes. We did lots of shows together, and I'm hoping that maybe in the future we can continue.
Yeah, we're talking about getting on the road, back on the air.
Yes,
and so we're looking forward to doing that and being able to get out into the community again like we did before COVID.
Yes. I thought this was a great opportunity to have you tell viewers and me something about the inside workings of the State House. It's been 11 years, and I can recall a statement you made early on. It was your first year. You were about to go to Boston. I was thinking about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It was something like that. But you said you were looking forward to going to that shining city on a hill. Pretty idealistic. And I was wondering if you have that same idealism 11 years later.
Well, Barbara, it's always going to be a city upon a hill, right? As one of the leading democratic institutions in the world, as you know, Massachusetts has the oldest continuously active written constitution in the world, superseding that of the United States and all other Western democracies. And but when you talk about the shining part, right? Every once in a while, it gets a little cloudy.
Okay.
and maybe the sun doesn't shine as much on one day, but then the next day the sun comes back out and it shines again. Right. And so over 11 years, you have ups and downs. Right. You see the strengths of our democratic institutions, of the House and the Senate, the General Court, and then occasionally you see low points. Mm-hmm. And but all in all, I think over the course of my tenure in Boston, we've had the opportunity to see us do some great things on behalf of the people of Massachusetts, great things on behalf of the communities, the cities and towns. But it's always a challenge to make sure that each day we're looking to the bright side of things, even when you have the ups and downs that we all have in every profession, in every family, in our economy, in our world with COVID. I mean, I always say everything shut down except for the State House, and there were only about 5 or 6 of us there.
Yeah, that's right. But you know, I like what you're saying, because that kind of acceptance of the ups and downs is what keeps us going, always with the thought that there's a better future, that there's something that we can work forward to.
And that's really, for me, as a legislator, the important part is that we're continuing, or I'm continuing as well, to always work to make lives better. Yes. For my family, for your family, for our families and our communities, and to really take the promise that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts presented to its people, mm-hmm. To be a commonwealth. And over the last number of years, we've made a real emphasis and focus to be more deliberate with equality and justice. And I serve on a special commission right now that we're reviewing the state seal and the motto, and looking at its impact on members of our community, particularly Indigenous members of Massachusetts, of course. And looking at how is our seal portraying the forward image of the Commonwealth itself, mm-hmm. and how do we work to make sure that it's inclusive, and that the term that I brought up at our last commission meeting was aspirational, right?
Yes, yes.
Our state motto, although it's written in Latin on the seal, it's "By the sword we seek peace, but peace under liberty." And that was really developed at a time when Massachusetts was trying to lead a freedom fight, right? To create the United States of America, to be free, independent states, and then to embark on its manifest destiny. And so today we're looking at that motto and saying, is that where we are, and does that look forward?
Yes, everything in context. Yeah. It doesn't seem to fit the kinds of aspirations we have today. So that's really interesting then, so that we've seen these changes can you say that the Massachusetts is still exceptional in the sense that it's a beacon and an example for the other 50 states?
You know, Barbara, I think it's almost a catch-22, right? When we talk about either exceptionalism in the Commonwealth or in the United States, to see the power and ability of our free system of government, of our system of economics, how it can lift up anyone in society and allow them the ability to pursue their dreams. But if the pendulum swings on that exceptionalism too much, where folks just see it as a given, a given that you don't invest to make sure that everyone around us has that opportunity to put up a ladder and climb it, and then to hold the ladder when someone climbs up below you, rather than pulling that ladder up, right? And I think sometimes we take for granted the freedoms that we have in this country. We take for granted the wealth that we have in this country. And that wealth doesn't make it into every kitchen.
Oh, that's
as
for sure.
As we deal with food insecurity issues, it doesn't make it into every classroom with young people striving to go on to higher education and the cost of that. So while we have all of these wealths, both in values, our ability to have free speech, ability to pursue our dreams, we always have to be cognizant that it's a gift, and it's a gift that we need to nurture and that we need to pass forward to each generation.
Yes, it's being said often that democracy is fragile, and so we need to protect it and keep working at it. And that's through legislation. So the idea that Massachusetts need not be an example. Each state has to work out its difficulties.
I always make a distinction when I teach the citizenship merit badge with the Boy Scouts. And we talk about duties and obligations of citizenship, right? And so we define the difference as the obligation is something that's codified by law that you have to do.
Yeah.
And that the duty is something that you do out of an internal motivation, right? And so voting, for example, which is coming up soon here in Massachusetts. So voting in this country is no longer an obligation. At one point in Massachusetts it was. You were legally bound if you were registered to vote. And in some countries it is that way, but in the United States and in Massachusetts it is a duty to participate in the process.
It is. And
it's not necessarily a bound obligation, whereas other laws are obligations.
Yes, and it's interesting that you say that in Massachusetts it was a law. Today, I recently saw some statistics, and usually voting is connected with higher levels of education. So in Massachusetts is tops in numbers of college graduates. And yet, I read in 2020, the presidential election turnout was barely 75%. And I think that there seems to be a lessening of voter turnout. I don't know what can be done about it or what is the cause.
Yeah, so I think part of it, Barbara, when you look at that idea of the duty, right? Folks feeling compelled that they have a stake in this democracy, that they're going to participate and they're going to do their best to educate themselves as to who the candidates are and what the issues are and whether or not to vote. But we've also worked hard to try to expand the franchise, right? To make it easier for individuals to vote, whether it was originally through motor voter, now registrations, and then having mail-in voting, right? And so for those that haven't taken it upon themselves internally to exercise the franchise, to see the duty to vote, when we add more of those individuals that aren't necessarily going to vote, you see those numbers go down because you've got more people registered. So in the end, less people vote. And so it's a catch-22 that what we really need to do is, I think, spend more time focusing on those that are registered and really trying to get them to vote and get them to take the franchise upon themselves. And the more folks we register, just for the sake of registering, we need to engage them, right? We need to give them opportunities to understand the importance and the value of participating, whether it's in an open town, as a town meeting. Here in Falmouth, obviously, we have a representative town meeting, so you have to run to be a member of town meeting. But later today, I'm going to be up in the town of Bourne, which has an open town meeting. So any registered voter in the town can come to that legislative body and vote to make decisions on the community of Bourne.
Well, speaking about making voting easier, the idea that has come up is maybe one that you won't agree with, and that is make voting day a holiday so that everyone is free. But I think what you're saying is that's not the answer.
So I actually think that would be a great idea on the federal holiday or the state holiday. We're on a state election cycle right now. But I also, we had some issues with whether or not we should vote in the schools and all this. So I thought, if it's a holiday, the schools won't have the children in it. Yeah. But why not engage the children to help monitor the polls, right? And learn about democracy and help hand out ballots and check folks in.
Right. Yeah, because maybe the reason why voters don't vote. I think the League of Women Voters years ago did a study, and they pointed to family culture as the reason. If your family, if you don't grow up in a family where voting is just taken for granted, you tend to not vote. It's not on your radar.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Barbara, because since Emma, our daughter, was 6 months old, she's been coming out to vote with us, and she gets the sticker, and so she's always. Matter of fact, she asked, "When can I vote?" So, well, when you're 18, you can vote, but you can come with Mom or I and see how this works, and then to talk about what are you voting for, what's on that ballot, and understand that, and so she knows, and she watches town meeting when I'm moderating the Falmouth town meeting. She'll watch it until bedtime.
Yeah,
we're usually up there late.
That's wonderful. And so what you're saying about having the kids in the schools makes sense, because then we have a way to introduce them to civic engagement. That's another great problem. I know that you have done quite a lot of work in that respect, in educational ways to engage young people so that they want to take part in town government.
Yeah, one of the first appointments that I received when I became a legislator was to the Special Commission on Civic Engagement and Learning. And Senator Moore at the time, Dick Moore, was the chair, and we had looked at the state of civic engagement and civic education in Massachusetts. We saw that there were some statutes on the books about things that should be taught in the schools. Then we did some surveys and found out that they weren't necessarily being taught in the schools, even though the statute said they would. And so we were looking at how to re-energize that. And Senator Moore and I were able to get the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to host a special board meeting in Malden at the headquarters the night before a regular board meeting to just discuss civic engagement and to roll out the recommendations of the commission. And at the end of that, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education decided to put a task force, a working group together that over the course of a few months began implementing some of the recommendations that we put and some of the things that then became a statute. We passed just a few years ago the civic education law, which talks about providing the opportunities for civic projects.
Yes.
And I've had the great opportunity in Falmouth, Bourne, and Mashpee to go and speak with students at the middle school level and the high school level to brainstorm ideas of a project that they can embark on.
Yes.
And that all came out of the commission.
They care about, so that going through and learning how to go about working toward that cause, what the strategies, rather than just a textbook studies.
Yeah, and as you said, identifying something that is of interest to them and is of concern in the community. Too often we think of like a community service project, right? We're going to go out and do something. That's a one-time volunteer opportunity. And really, the goal behind these projects is for young people to look at the community. And I always start these presentations by, what do you see in the community that you want to fix, that you think could be better? You know, and I get stuff all over the gamut. And then we start talking about, well, who would you talk to about that? Well, I don't know. Well, that sounds to me like this would be under the school committee or the select board, or that might be a state issue, and I'm the rep, so talk to me about this one. And so I help the young people map the community and then connect with the resources, the folks that I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with over the years, to be able to directly connect the students to those individuals that are in that domain of the project that they're looking to embark
that's
on.
how it would have to work. I wish we had some way of knowing whether or not school systems are doing this and doing it in the right way.
Yeah, so we also have a conference, a statewide conference now of best practices. That is being funded in part by the Civic Trust, the Education Trust that was established in that statute. So we're looking at best practices from different communities and being able to share that with other educators.
I see. So
and it's about time that
we
we do a circle back. We, obviously things got derailed a little bit over the last couple of years with COVID, but most of these projects continued in some virtual way. For the year that most of our students weren't in school, and then as students came back to school, they started to ease back into the projects. But we do need to go back and really take another snapshot of how far have we come since the passing of the law.
And best practice, that means teachers can then access that information.
Yes,
and
yes,
learn
absolutely.
themselves how to do this. I think that may be one of the answers, to have young people engage, and then later on in their adult life become voters. But David, I wonder, our viewers may want to hear something about what it's like to be at the State House right now. Can you give us a kind of a view of a day in the life of a Republican legislator?
So a day in a life is different every day, right? So the days change. We're in what's called informal session right now. So every 72 hours under the Constitution, the General Court has to meet in an informal session. So we've completed the roll call voting and the formal sessions. But just right up until August 1st, we were still using the hybrid voting model. Where remote voting was authorized after a few months of strictly informal sessions. And so the evolution for me over the last couple of years has been very interesting, actually. I happen to be covering for the minority party in the House of Representatives the week of the COVID shutdowns. And what that means is that there's at least one Republican and one Democrat in the chamber with the clerk. And anything that passes has to pass by unanimous consent. If there's any objection, then it has to wait until there's a roll call opportunity. So when the shutdown happened, there was no authorization or rule to have any type of remote voting, which means all legislation had to be passed by unanimous consent. And during that week, some of the viewers know that I used to work in emergency management here in Barnstable County and did some work with FEMA as well. And actually did training on pandemic response through the Center for Domestic Preparedness. I happened to be there when the first exposure happened. I was in the Speaker's office, Speaker DeLeo at the time, and he and I were having a meeting before one of the informal sessions when the Chief of Staff knocked on the door and apologized for interrupting our conversation and said that we needed to leave the office. And this was early on when we really weren't sure exactly what the coronavirus was all about. And we walked out into the hallway, and folks with full hazmat gear were there to come in and clean the Speaker's office because we had the first case of COVID in the State House. And so I spoke to the minority leader and said, look, I've been trained to do this. I know about the PPEs. I know the process both internally and externally. Why don't I just continue to cover rather than rotate out 1 week, rather than have our members come in and rotate week after week after week after week? And so for the first few months, I was serving as the minority representative in the House along with Paul Donato from Medford. He was serving as the Speaker of the House. And we would come in sometimes 4 days a week to continue to move the legislation necessary for the governor's orders dealing with the pandemic response of PUA, unemployment, various appropriations necessary, emergency authorizations. Those things had to come through the legislature, and they had to be done by unanimous consent. So after that, we created a remote procedure. And so over the last year and a half, we've had the ability to vote remotely, but somebody's got to be on the other end of remote.
I see. Yeah,
And so I've been a monitor. I've been
Sure.
there every day, every formal session in the last 2 years on the other end of remote with my division taking the votes
And
over.
there were no surges of COVID? Was that
No,
under
we've had
control?
cases, as every other workplace has,
I
here
see.
and there. Some of our members decided in the last session, the last part of the formal session, to come in person. So we had a lot higher numbers present. But all of our members have been participating in the process. It's just whether or not they were comfortable coming into the building, and you know, everyone has different medical situations,
Right.
and some folks take care of other family members that might need to be protected as well, and so we've been fluid that way. I'm hoping to get back to the new session and be able to have us all in person. There are freshman legislators that haven't been able to build the relationships that are so important with their colleagues
Yes.
by not being around and present.
Yes, I
we're
was
getting
going
there.
to ask you about that. Relationships are critical in the State House. That is, coming to know with whom you're working, and
It's so
trusting.
important.
Yeah.
It's so important. It's so important to build the relationships, whether it's with folks that are in your political party, across the political aisle, across chambers between the House and the Senate.
And I suspect that the discourse is not as toxic in the State House in Boston as it is in Washington. I can't believe that the kind of discourse I'm hearing from people on the campaign trail is what's happening in the corridors of the Capitol. I don't know. Tell us what it's like in the State House.
Yeah, we tend to be more civil, you know, in Boston than we see happening in our nation's capital. You know, both parties have folks that speak before they think. I think, you know,
Yes.
I'll put it that way. You know, my grandfather used to always say, "Never burn a bridge because you don't know when you have to cross it." Right.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
we can
good
disagree
advice.
on a piece of legislation, we can disagree on a policy, and so we should have a dialogue, and we should be talking about what our points of disagreement are, and whether we're trying to advocate for our position or convince someone to see it our way. The focus should be on the position, the policy, the issue, and not get into personalities and
That's
not
right,
attack
that's right.
someone because you think differently than I do. You're bad, I'm good, right? You're right, I'm wrong. You're bad, I'm good. And that is what breaks down the ability to compromise and to find common ground, the things that we
Yes.
can agree on, that we can move forward together. Now, I've always liked to try to find those things that I can agree on with legislators that are on the other side of the political aisle from me, and then focus on that and work on the things that we can get done together. And then when it comes to the things that we disagree on, then we
Right.
advocate for our positions and we push a different button.
Yes, in an open forum, the best argument wins, and it's the argument that needs to be carried through and done civilly.
And sometimes folks get so passionate, which passion's good, passion that drives action, right? Passion drives action. But they get so passionate that they take it personally, and that's a constant.
Yeah. So we have November 8th. We want to remind viewers to vote November 8th. Be sure to get out and vote. That's an important election, and it's an election that you are certainly a candidate for, and it seems to me that you probably want to say something about that.
Yeah, every 2 years it's a big job interview, right? You have 43,000 employers to hire you, right?
Yes.
And whoever shows up of those 43,000 get to make that decision as to who the legislator is going to be. And my role, I've always tried to be a community convener, an organizer, a connector of the dots, and to work on behalf of everyone, regardless of what political party you are. I always joke about my purple tie, right? My wife's an art teacher, and you know, she told me if you mix red and blue, you get purple, right? And so when folks call my office, sometimes they'll say, well, you know, they'll tell my aide, well, you know, I'm a Democrat, and she'll say, Kathy will say, well, it doesn't matter to Dave. It's just you've got an issue that you need help with, and he's here to help you. Like, it doesn't matter what political party you are. You're one of my constituents, and that's my responsibility is to uphold the trust between the office of your representative to state government and the trust between the individual constituents. And so it's been an honor to be state representative for a number of years already, and look forward to continuing to build the trust and to help folks navigate state government and to help the Commonwealth provide the best resources it can to our communities.
Well, it's a pleasure to know that that some of that idealism is still active for 11 years, and it is kind of inspires the rest of us to know that that we have to keep working at it, keep making the situation better, keep an eye on democracy so that it does stay strong.
Democracy is not a spectator sport.
Right,
we all got to put a jersey on and
yes,
play.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. It's been interesting to talk again, and I look forward to seeing you again and having another conversation, and perhaps even going on the road with David Vieira.
Absolutely, Barbara.
Right,
I'm looking forward to getting back on the road with you, and we'll go out and show the folks of the 3rd Barnstable District what's happening in the community and the work that we do.
Yes. I recall the last time you were had put boots on and jumped into the water, and you were using electric shocks to count fish.
Counting fish, yes. That was
from the State House.
We were in the Quashnet River, and since then, working with the Rod and Gun Club and state agencies in the town, we've done a restoration on the Childs River, and we're now counting those fish in the Childs River. The sea run brook trout have returned to the Childs River.
Yeah, that's all wonderful. Thank you again.
Thanks, Barbara.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with Barbara.